Hey all, this is just a real quick video on how to put in an image into your Pygame animation. I had a couple people ask me some questions, so I wanted to just show you. It's quite simple. So the first thing you need to do is download the image and put it into your project folder. So here I downloaded a picture of Santa and reindeer, which is a PNG. And I've placed it into my project folder. You can also create, like an image directory and put them all. Like if you have many pictures, you can put them all in there. You'll just have to change where the source folder is. If you put it directly in your project, then all you need to know is what the file name is. So what I'm going to be using is the. Let me show you guys here. So in our Pygame documentation, we're going to be using the image class here. So Pygame image, and there's a load function that loads a new image from a file. The image module, it says here, is a required dependency of Pygame, but it only optionally supports any extended file formats. So some of you may have issues, especially Mac users tend to run into this more. Some of you may have issues with JPEG files or PNG files. By default, uncompressed bitmap images will work. So if you want to put an image in, but when you run it, it's saying the file can't be loaded in or file format not recognized, you can try and install some of these dependencies, and there's you can check Stack Overflow for that, or you can convert it to a bitmap. Just go onto like an online converter. And just change it to a bitmap image, and then that should work. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to call this function here, pygameimage.load, and we'll go back into our Eclipse. Okay. So I want to do this you can do this in setup, you can do it in your main before the while loop. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to go ahead and do it in the main. I'm going to call this image Santa image, and I'm going to call pygame.image.load. And in the load function, all you need is the file name. So Santa reindeer.png. And that loads it into and returns a surface. So if you look at the documentation here, load returns a surface object. And so that's what we're going to use to draw our image. Now, so Santa image is actually a surface. And so what I'm going to do now is down in my draw loop, before I'm going to do it before I draw the snow. Just going to put after the event cues. So right in here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a function called blit. And what blit does is it transfers all of the pixels from one surface and transfers them onto another surface. So we're essentially going to be painting the image onto our background, if you will. And so this is done with a screen. The surface you want to paint onto .blit. Okay. And that function, so that's a surface function, and that function, if you look, surface.blit, draws one image onto another. Okay. And the parameters it takes are a source, a destination, and then there's an area or some other special flags that you can use for this. But we're just going to do the basic one with the source and the destination. So it says draw a source surface onto this surface, and this draw can be positioned with the destination argument. So source is our source of the image. That'll be our Santa image. And destination is going to be where we draw them. And it says destination can either be a pair of coordinates representing the upper left corner of the source. A rectangle can also be passed as the destination, and the top left corner of the rectangle will be used as the position for the blit. The size of the destination rectangle does not affect the blit. So if you already have a surface and you want to put it onto that surface, you can put that in as a parameter. Okay, so what that means is now we're going to blit the Santa image onto our screen. And here we can just put the coordinates. So I'm just going to start with basic coordinates to just make sure it shows up. So I'm going to put it at 100, 100, which should be slightly off the top left. And at that point, I can be able to run my code and see. It's not. There it is. Okay. And so you can see the image. The image is on top of the blue background, but in front of that, but behind the snow. So the snow falls in front of it, which is a nice effect. If I drew this after the snow, then it would be, you would see the snow falling behind it. Okay. So that's good, and that's a static image. And now this image drew it exactly the size as is. So now I want to show you guys how to resize the image. Okay. So this is done with one more command. And we'll do this up in the load because it only needs to be resized one time. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to use the transform function, transform.scale function. And what this does is this transforms a scale. It scales a surface based to a new width and height. So the surface is our initial one that we want to resize. We want to resize the Santa image. Let's say I just want to resize it to like half, or yeah. Well, I could simply put in 100 by 100, and this function returns a surface, a new surface. So we have to set our original variable, and we could always say resized Santa image and save it. But then we have two variables, so we really only need one variable here. I could say something like resized Santa, and then change this to resized Santa here, and then I have two in case you wanted multiple sizes, but that seems a little bit extra for what we need. So let's go back to the way it was, and if I run this, you can see that I have a 100 by 100 Santa image here, which isn't great. It didn't maintain the aspect ratio. So there are ways of doing that. One way is to simply scale it based on some factor. So let's say that I wanted to make a scale factor of 0.75. This is one way of doing it. I'm sure there's some other functions in the transform class that will maintain aspect ratio. But this is what I'm thinking of right now that will work. So I can take the image, and I can call this get width, and I can multiply it by the scale factor. And I can do the same thing for the height. And multiply it by our scale factor. Now both these need to be integers, so we'll have to cast them to ints using the int function. And so that'll round it if I do happen to get a decimal. So this should scale it to 75% of the size, right? And the nice thing about doing this is now I can adjust it. If I go up to 2, this will actually resize it to larger, twice the size. I can go down to half the size. And it maintains the aspect ratio of this image. Okay, so I'm going to keep it right about 0.75. I think that looks good. Now I want to talk about just real fast how to animate this, right? So down here I just have two coordinates that I'm drawing this in, right? X and Y at 100 apiece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called Santa X, Santa X, which is going to represent its Y coordinate. And what we're going to do is we're going to start this at negative, and I'll show you why I'm doing this. The Santa image dot get width. All right, so that's where Santa X is going to start. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this in at Santa X 100 instead of 100 100. And what you'll see is actually it's not on the screen, right? Because I've started it all the way off the screen. I've started at a negative coordinate, and the furthest most left coordinate is 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to each frame, I'm going to draw it, and then I'm going to increment Santa X by some amount. Let's start with 1, and we'll see how that looks as far as speed goes. Okay. So it loads in, and so you can see that Santa is now moving across the screen. Quite slow. 1 pixel per frame. I'm running at some frames per second. 30. So it'll be moving 30 pixels every second, which isn't very fast. So I can, amp that up a little bit. Let me say let's move them 5 frames per second. And now it's taking a little while to load in. But there you go. He's moving pretty good. Okay. And so we'll do one more kind of cool thing here. So let's say that I want him to just go back and forth. So when he finishes going off the right side of the screen, I want him to come back a little bit later. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in an if statement that will control whether or not I subtract or I add this 5 at a time. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll say if Santa X is greater than my screen width, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do Santa X minus equals 5, which is going to reverse it. And actually, I want to actually make a variable for the speed. So we'll let's make a variable called Santa speed. We'll call it Santa V. We'll start that at positive 5. So Santa X will plus equal Santa V, Santa's velocity. Let's call it Vx, just in case we wanted to maneuver it in the X and Y direction. So now what I'll do is I'll say Santa Vx equals negative 5, or negative Santa Vx. We'll just switch the sign of it when it's greater than the width, which will mean that it will start moving in the opposite direction when I run it. And so what we should see, hopefully, and we'll see if this worked, is that once it gets off the screen, it'll start going in reverse, and his speed will switch to negative, and he'll come back onto the screen. Okay. Now that's kind of cool. Now it won't bounce back the other way. The other thing is, he's facing the wrong direction, so maybe I just want him to go back and forth across the sky or something like that. So what I want to do here is I can inside this if, when I switch directions, I can let's see. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, inside this loop, what I can do is I can transform the image so that it's a reverse of the Santa Claus image. And this is done also in the transform, but it's transform dot flip, and this flips it. Let's look at the look at the surface here. Transform. flip vertically and horizontally. So you can flip a surface either vertically, horizontally, or both. Flipping a surface is non-destructive and returns a new surface with the same dimensions. So there's X Boolean or Y Boolean. So these are going to be true-false values of whether or not I want to flip it. Seems like vertical would be the Y and the horizontal would be the X. So I want to flip it in the X direction. So what I'll do is I'll go back to my clips window. And I will flip Santa image. And I want the let's see, the X coordinate. I want the X Boolean to be true. I want to flip it horizontally, but I don't want to flip it vertically. Right? I'm going to amp up the speed a little bit just so it goes across the screen a little bit faster. Now he's booking. Oops, can't see on the. Let me run that again. Kind of. There we go. So now he flips around. Okay, and it ends there. Okay, so we're almost done with what I want to do. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to flip it back. So we'll put in an elif here, and elif is a little bit better than if because it's not going to go off the right and left side screen in the same check. So if it does the first one, it won't check the second one. So it'll save us a little bit efficiency here. Not very much. But, so I say Santa X is less than, if Santa X is less than 0, or sorry, it needs to go all the way off the screen. So if it's less than its image width, the negative of the image width. So it's completely off the left side of the screen. Then I will do the same thing. I'll flip it horizontally. So actually, since I'm going to put these two lines of code in here, why don't I combine these with an OR? So why don't I have Santa X is greater than the screen dot width, or take that up there and delete that else if. So if either one of these is true, we're gonna transform it. And so now it goes over, back, and returns. And it just will keep doing that. So that's pretty cool. What we can do now is just to kind of finish this off, maybe is every time it transforms, let's scale it down by some amount. So let's go ahead and grab this rescale. Maybe we should put that in a function. That would be a good idea since we're now copying and pasting it, but my video's almost over, so let's scale it by like 0.8 each time. Hopefully this doesn't break it. So every time through, okay, I figured that would happen. It gets kind of stuck. As we resize it, it's now further off the screen. So we'll do let's see. What's happening is when I resize it down, I scale it down, this image width now changes, so it's moved too far for it to be able to catch it, and so it's going to be calling this switch twice, which is going to keep it going left off the screen. So a fix for that is to simply put in an if statement here to make sure that if Santa VX is negative, then we will make it positive, but we won't switch it more than once. That means we do have to break these into two again. Yeah, so we can actually do that here. So if Santa X is greater than the screen, that means it's off to the right. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that the velocity hasn't already been turned negative. So if it's off the screen to the right and Santa VX, the velocity of Santa is greater than 0, then that means like when it gets off the screen and it's still going in the positive direction, then this will switch. But if it's already going in the negative direction, we don't need to switch it again. Same thing here for the negative direction. If it's going less than 0, full screen that. If it's going in the negative direction and it's all the way off the left of the screen, and the velocity of this is negative, then we want to change it. But other than that, we don't want to change it. Okay, so we'll see what happens now as we run it one more time, hopefully. You can see it gets a little bit smaller, and we can see that it's like Santa is disappearing into the night. All right, so hopefully that was helpful. Got you a little intro into Pygame images, and yeah, I will hopefully post some more tutorial videos in the future, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. All right.